On your Thursday episode of Locked On Raptors, of course, we don't talk about Giannis on this podcast because there's no way he's going to end up on the Raptors, unless, of course, there's news about him maybe ending up on the Raptors.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Thursday, May the 15th, and I am your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can also find the show on Instagram, and you can join us over on the Locked On Raptors Discord server, link in the description of the podcast, free to join as always. And on the Instagram side of things, I'm trying to be better at promoting myself and stuff. You'll find more clips over there. Please go follow the account, like the clips, share them around. Let's get that algo going, baby. Thanks in advance. Today's show, we're digging into some smell tests of various reports. Of course, it's summertime. It's the off season. There's all kinds of subterfuge and stuff flying around. The combine is going on. The whole league is in Chicago. And so we're going to dig into a couple of reports from yesterday from various levels of insider and just sniff them a little bit, see how real or not real they may be. We're also going to talk a little about the prospect of a Pascal Siakam OG Anunoby Conference Finals, which is going to leave us feeling all kinds of emotions. And we're going to do it all, of course, with our emotions correspondent. It's Katie Heindl. Katie, how the hell are you?
I'm doing really well, Sean. It's nice to be back. Actually, I will say coming back to Canada from Europe, you are like, this place is a dump. It is still nice to be back. Summer is here. Mm-hmm. The trees just like busted out over the last couple days. It's nice.
Mm-hmm. Trees busting out just like everyone's calves are, because as you have declared with your little lower third on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, shorts are in season.
Yeah,
Woo!
Yeah. Get your shorts out. Take what pleasure you can, even if it's a little bit chilly like today. I'm wearing shorts.
Get some sun on them gams. Is that your gams legs? I always confuse that.
Yeah, I think so.
Get some sun on them gams. That's the party line of today's podcast. All right, Katie, we're going to get into a report from Marc Stein regarding Masai Ujiri and the Atlanta Hawks, which is pretty funny. We're also going to talk about that OG Siakam stuff later on, but let's start with the big one. Of course, I've made a pledge to not really talk about Giannis on this podcast because it doesn't feel terribly likely that the Raptors actually end up there. But, of course, we got to give the people what they want. And there was at least a report yesterday circulating around that everyone was talking about and making reaction videos to. So we got to play the game. Giannis apparently wants to stay in the Eastern Conference. This comes from Scoop B, a guy who does report things, wouldn't necessarily say those things end up always being true and accurate. It certainly doesn't qualify as like one of the 4 to 5 inner circle insiders who are to be trusted when they post stuff immediately. But he's not a total nobody. He's, got some experience in radio, NBA broadcast production, things like that. So he's, I'm assuming there's some actual sources going on here because I don't think people in the biz just make stuff up. The premise of his article is essentially that Giannis his preference would be to stay in the Eastern Conference, with the Raptors and the Brooklyn Nets being named as the two teams that are kind of zeroing in as targets based on the ability to kind of be in a big market that can attract free agents, the opportunity to have some cachet in terms of team building decisions and things like that. And, I guess sort of like business interests out east as well. So Katie, get the sniffer going. What do you make of this one? Do you think there is anything to the idea that Giannis might want to stay east? I'll say, looking at the Western Conference, the gauntlet that it is, as like a work smart, not hard guy that I am, I understand. It's just wanting to willingly go out west feels like the equivalent of asking your landlord to raise your own rent because you're on that grind. To each their own. But I could totally understand if Giannis wanted to stay east for just the competitive reasons alone.
Competitive reasons, and I think the optics of star power, to your point, you've got a much better chance of staying a bona fide star if you're staying in the East. The West is pretty clogged with them. Though a lot of them, I think, in the West are kind of aging out of the picture, which is something that I think Giannis is also looking at too, right? When you see, obviously Dame got hurt, but when you still look at the impactfulness of stars in these playoffs, they haven't really been the reason why the teams that we're now seeing, in the Wolves case, like make it into the conference finals, and in the East, like whichever of these teams does, it's not because they've got a Giannis-sized star. So that's quite interesting to me. So I think his longevity, I think his longevity stays intact if he stays in the East.
Sure.
And then, they are like the simplest answer. The simplest explanation is usually true. I only realized about 10 minutes before we started recording that he and Bam Adebayo share an agent.
Ooh.
I'm like, oh yes, okay. Now the East, specifically Miami, specifically no Florida state income tax. Giannis is a little bit cheap. So all these things combined, I'm like, Miami makes sense. I know you've got your qualms with that, but I do think, he's like made his mark in the East. It makes a lot of sense to me to stay. Why go into a Western Conference where you're basically going to have to almost like renegotiate your dynamics and your pull as a star, and like what role you're going to have to play on any of these like big hitting teams. Even a team like the Rockets, I feel like he'd still have to sort of renegotiate what kind of player he is, and I don't think he's at a stage in his career where he really wants to do that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the article itself, I mean, there are reasons to be skeptical, as there is with any article that gets brought up these days with any kind of subterfuge or rumor, because that's just how the operation works. This is the transaction industrial complex at full tilt. But I think the concept of him wanting to stay in the East does pass the smell test a little bit to me. Where it kind of loses me is it still doesn't change the fact that the Raptors don't really have a package of stuff that would be, I think, on par with what a team like the Rockets or the Spurs could offer up. And I guess it just comes down to how much does Milwaukee want to take care of their dude after 12 years of, him being the face of the franchise? Like, do they care about sending him where he wants to go? And then if that's the case, and it is, he wants to go somewhere in the East, do the Raptors have enough to compete with the Brooklyn Nets when it comes to just like pure pick equity? I think the big reason why I've just like kind of ruled the Raptors out of any bidding war, unless he just hand picks the Raptors and the Bucks say, okay, buddy, we'll make it happen because we love you. I think it's just because the Raptors picks are all the picks they have. And if you're trading your own picks to the team that has Giannis and then employing Giannis, like the Bucks, they're not standing to gain a whole lot from that, because they've seen what having Giannis on your team means. It means you're drafting very low, and they also don't have their own picks to tank with. And so the Nets have picks from other teams. They have their own picks as well. And like, I think they'd have a less sort of clear pathway to contention if they got Giannis than the Raptors would, just because the rest of the roster is pretty bare. And so, how does that change how the Bucks feel about those picks? They have, I think, a Sixers pick in there as well, which might be a nice, juicy thing to throw in. Like, it's just tough, I think, to find a way for the Raptors to come out on top of any bidding war, whether it's with teams in the West or just teams out East. The Miami thing is interesting. They always seem to get the star that they want. I don't think they have nearly enough stuff to trade. And they're out picks. What are they going to throw in? Tyler Hero? Like, is that what the Bucks are restarting their franchise with? I guess go further into the Heat thought for you, Katie, because it does, like, it would be an extremely Heat thing to do, but I don't quite see the avenue to it happening, despite, like you mentioned, the shared agents between Bam and Giannis, which, by the way, will come up when we talk about the Atlanta Hawks in just a second as well.
Well, first I realized I didn't mention the Raptors at all on our Raptors podcast in terms of being in the running. I mean, we all know that like this is an area that Masai Ujiri has kind of like, he's worked this avenue for seasons now.
They've been rather obsessive,
Giannis.
One would argue.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, like I'm kind of for that. Like he also does like as a GM, he pulls a lot of like strings behind the curtain, but I'm also for like when front offices just like put their cards on the table and you want to shoot your shot in a very open way. Like sometimes it's okay to be despo. Like the league moves really fast, and sometimes like stars like to be wooed.
Yeah.
And they like to be wooed in public, right? Anyway,
I'm just going to pull up some of those videos of Greek fans cheering on Giannis in Toronto.
Yeah, look, like other than the tax thing, speaking as someone who did their taxes and is now a libertarian for the next month because of that. Anyway, that obviously is not as sweet as some place like Florida, but there's a lot of other reasons,
Sure.
from like the jokingly like, well, he's lived in Milwaukee and he understands what winter's like, to the more, I think, honestly, like prevalent and pressing things. You could get into the politics of it all right now, like the feel of the States versus, a place like Toronto and Canada. Anyway, and I don't know, the team is kind of equipped to, other than what they'd have to give up, I guess, is equipped to play, to have someone like that quite easily slotted in. Anyway, yes, to the Miami point, Miami and Pat Riley specifically are very used to getting what they want. I think there's a reason they were very, the season was sort of a write-off. Yeah, sure, they made the play-in. It was really not. That was sort of by fluke, I think. I think there's a reason they didn't really make any moves and they let the Jimmy Butler saga unfold as long as it did. There was no urgency to really get that done other than Jimmy landing on a team for what he hoped would be playoff contention. And I think it's because they sort of saw the cards of this offseason, which is going to be a tricky one because of the final like CBA. Like this is a bad offseason for free agents. Like there's a lot to be said for a team that might want to make some major moves with someone like Giannis becoming suddenly available because he's unhappy. They have a lot more to woo someone with. Yes, I don't know who they'd give up. Just Tyler Hero seems like a kind of the Bucks. I don't know. One Tyler Hero does not a Giannis make. So there have to be, I think, some other guys in consideration. Would that be like a Tyler Hero and a Jaime Jaquez?
That's still so not enough. If it wasn't enough to get Dame, I mean,
I think what's going to be actually interesting with this, and this is a little bit of an aside, but I'll go through it quickly, is just like this sense that we touched on before, this like valuation of superstars and sort of where they're at. And this is going to be a really interesting barometer for guys in Giannis's sort of generational class, I think, to like their pull versus a pull of like the next gen guys like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's not going anywhere. I just mean like in terms of, next contract sort of thing. So I'm actually quite curious about that because the Heat have an opportunity to sort of dictate what that is. Yeah. Because Giannis is in a position of power for sure, I think, because of who he is. But like that experiment really failed in Milwaukee with Dame, and Dame's going to be out at least a season probably. Dame is really the one that gets the short end of the stick in this entire thing, which I like. I feel quite bad for Dame. But there's something that we haven't really touched on. I think, we've like talked around it, reported around it. But I don't think it's worked. And I don't know if that's because of personalities or just like the way that they play, a combination of both most likely. But there's some real, I think, gloominess and unhappiness there, which is, I think, the only reason he's entertaining this. This doesn't feel to me like a Giannis thing of like, I'm going to dangle this so the team will the Bucks will give me this. Yeah. And I think the Bucks front office feels that too. I think there's only so far you can kind of extend somebody, even if they are Giannis. But yeah, Miami, to me, just kind of feels like that gravitational. They still have that pull to stars in this specific era or of their career.
And I think, like, to your point of this being a pretty good test case of like how teams view superstars of this age bracket now and like the changing CBA, like, yeah, there's every possibility that, we all think that there should be an immense bidding war for Giannis and that everyone should be putting all of their cards on the table because it's freaking Giannis. Of course you do that. But we have seen teams get burned by doing that in recent years. And so maybe that does kind of tamp down the market. And maybe that's where the Raptors, again, to bring it back, like maybe that's where they kind of sneak their way in here and end up getting Giannis for something much less than you would think. I still think there's other teams that are going to be able to still beat them out, even if it is like a dimmed down market. But certainly we'll keep talking about Giannis on the podcast. Okay. As much as I think it's still far-fetched, we'll still, we got a whole off season of pods to do, I guess.
Reminiscent of the Kawhi stuff. Of the Kawhi situation, not in terms of like how, things haven't, of course, fallen that far between Giannis and the Bucks as they did between Kawhi and the Spurs. But it does feel like this sort of ripe opportunity that Ujiri is very good at identifying. However, I know we're going to talk about what's up with Ujiri. So
yeah, well, let's get to that here, Katie. We've run a little long, but that's okay because Giannis talk is what we're here for, baby. This is a Giannis podcast now. We'll come back on the other side, and we will talk about the Marc Stein report regarding the Atlanta Hawks and their interest in Masai Ujiri. I would also love $1 million. Does that mean I'm getting it? Probably not. We'll get into that coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by friends over at Wayfair. The days are getting longer. It's short season, of course, as officially declared by Katie Heindl, and people are spending more time outside in their outdoor spaces. It means it's a perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. And you can do that with Wayfair, whether you got a big backyard, small balcony, whatever it might be. Wayfair has everything you need to make it feel more like you and make your outside time relaxing and enjoyable all summer long. Wayfair's massive selection of outdoor essentials makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversation sets to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all and at prices that fit your budget. I love sitting outside. I love to take calls outside. My favorite thing to do in the summertime. Post up under an umbrella, maybe get some, a nice bowl of like fresh cold fruit that I eat while I sit and do conference calls on my outdoor couch. It's a beautiful thing. You can do just the same for your calls if you're a remote at home worker by going to Wayfair. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online this summer. Get outside with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Back at it here with Katie Heindl as we dig into some more smelling stuff, smell testing, various reportage from various NBA insiders. The next one we're getting into here, Katie, is from Marc Stein, one of them plugged in insider guys who is on stuff quite a bit. And so this one, I think it merits at least some conversation. The report from Marc Stein is that the Atlanta Hawks are interested in potentially trying to woo Masai Ujiri to take over their top front office job. Of course, Landry Fields was just let go. Shout out our pal Landry Fields. Great PSP commercial actor, among other things. And the report, look, it leads with Masai. He's not really mentioned all that much in this report from Marc Stein. It is essentially the Atlanta Hawks are interested in trying to hire Toronto's Masai Ujiri away. This is Masai's CV. He's done all this stuff, and also that they're interested in these other guys. I don't feel like this one has a whole lot of smoke to it, Katie. Not just because, there's no mention in there of like Masai's contract situation in Toronto or any potential discontent. In fact, there's just quotes from Masai about how he's stoked to try to win again in Toronto and how he's stoked to pick 9th in the draft and all of this stuff. There's a lot more talk in there about other potential candidates, including as you mentioned, Giannis and Bam Adebayo's agent, Alex Saratzis, who is apparently in the running here. To me, Katie, this feels like some bluster from a franchise that has no sauce. Of course, their owner, Tony Ressler, very, very much up in people's business, a very hands-on owner that makes it, not so pleasant for those making the decisions on the team. His son, Nick Ressler, is very much in control and has a lot of sway over personnel and player decisions as well. That does not feel like a Masai Ujiri landing spot to me, Katie. Does this one pass the smell test for you at all?
I realize I can text someone like now and find out about this.
Get on that source. You got okay.
No, I don't.
We'll smell test your reporting.
I'm not
next.
built to be an insider. Like I love the gossip, but it's like no, I'm not built to be. I don't need to report on it. It's
I just need to react to it and
it's fun to have. Sometimes to like know and then be like, oh, it was true. Okay. Anyway, what I will say is, I think I don't know if it's like unhappiness. I don't want to like report on other people's feelings or whatever, but I think it's fair to say there's some friction, and I think that's known between new ownership, specifically of the Rodgers ilk. And who does Rodgers not have friction with? Am I right?
Yeah. You ever seen your phone bill? That's friction, baby.
You ever switched to the only other provider because of that one provider? You know what
and then switch back 2 years later because the other one is leaving you high and dry.
All literally been there.
Don't we love living in Canada? Carry on.
I think
come here, Giannis. The telecoms are great.
Yeah. Play for big telecom. I think there's truth to that. However, I don't think that it has infiltrated the way Masai makes decisions. And I think the most important thing to him has always been the freedom and autonomy to make decisions for the team without having a meddling ownership group, sort of looking over his shoulder. Larry Tannenbaum let him do that. It does seem, at least thus far, that the new ownership board is letting him also do that. Yep. So I think that's an important thing to look at. And then the other thing about a report like this is like, what other team, any team that's looking for, which is a lot of front offices are in a bit of chaos mode, would all be like considering, I'm doing quotes for people not watching, considering Masai Ujiri, like you would consider stability if you were in an unstable relationship. You would be thinking about it all the time. So I think that's probably where the truth ends. You're right. This is where I learned about Bam and Giannis sharing an agent. The idea of having a player agent, like they don't really know what they're doing. If that's how extreme they are, like we're going to let a player agent be in charge. No, nothing against player agents.
Worked with
like
Bob Myers for a hot second there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. There's sometimes you take big swings and
Steph Curry, maybe.
And they work.
I remember when he started, but yes.
But I think there has to be a certain bedrock of consistency and proof in a franchise, and the Hawks don't have that and haven't had that for quite a while. Like, bless you, Quinn Snyder, but they don't have a lot of like a plan going for them, right? And I think that's been pretty clear. I know that can be quite enticing to a potential like GM to swoop in and be like, I can fix them. But I also think there's a big reality check involved. So I would say take this at just the extreme literal face value. As I said, like any team would consider someone like Masai Ujiri.
Yeah.
And that's where it ends.
Yeah. Like I said before, I'd like $1 million and a better public transit system.
Yeah.
It does not mean I'm just going to get it because I want it. Like, great. To report that away if you want. It means nothing. And I mean, to your point, like, maybe Ed Rogers and Masai have butted heads over the years. It seems like maybe things have smoothed over a little bit over the last year or so. There's been less noise as, the team has kind of seemingly righted itself when it comes to front office decisions and seems to be heading in like a clear direction, which is nice. But if you think Masai and Ed Rogers have a tough relationship, like imagine that dynamic, but without a boardroom involved and like another fail son involved. Like it's just like, that does not seem to be the kind of environment Masai Ujiri is going to be seeking out. Like I've always thought that if Masai is going on to a different job, it's probably, a kind of a higher level job, honestly. Maybe it's like running the BAL or it's, kind of investing further in Giants of Africa, or running for political office or something like that. I don't think he'll actually do that. I think he likes hoops too much to do that, as he kind of outlined at his end of season presser. But like, I don't think it's going to be for some rinky-dink franchise like the Atlanta Hawks. So, I get it. They're in a big market, but also they're the Atlanta Hawks. Have you seen their last 30 years of track record? Like, what are we talking about here? It's akin to like when the Wizards were like, oh, the Raptors won the championship. We'd love to sign that guy away. Yeah, good luck, man. Cool. Great. Awesome. Keep on dreaming big, man. And look, Masai's contract situation, I think it's up at the end of next year. He very well could be going somewhere else. It could be coming to an end. There's no doubt about it. That's always a possibility when a guy's been around for this long and the team has not had a ton of success over the last 5 years or so. But I do think that there's a lot of, like this. I mean, if you kind of compare it over to the baseball side of things, which Ed Rogers obviously has a big hand in as well. I mean, they've valued stability and consistency with a front office that just can't get out of its own way over the last 9 years, almost 10 years now. Like, they're all right to have a little bit of patience, I think. And when you've got the track record that Masai does, I think that patience is only going to be increased. And so, he very well could be done at the end of next year. And, this report has nothing to do with that. Like, he could go somewhere else. Don't think it's going to be the Hawks. Don't think it's going to be this summer. I think it's very much all the talk about him wanting to win here again in Toronto. Like, I believe that when he says it. I don't think that's just bluster. I don't think that's contract leverage creating or anything like that. I think it's just a guy being earnest about his wants and desires. And so, and especially if there's a chance to get Giannis in Toronto this summer, there's like a faint wisp of it. I can't imagine him being like, oh, now's the time to leave. Like, it does not line up to me at all. We're going to come back, Katie, talk about a couple of guys that Masai drafted and helped oversee the development of, who might be playing each other in the conference finals unless the Celtics do something really hilarious. We're going to come back on the other side, get into the prospect of Siakam, OG, Conference Finals and the emotions that are very much tied into that. We'll do that coming up in just 1 second. It's Emotions Corner here on your Thursday edition of Locked On Raptors as the Eastern Conference playoffs are seemingly headed towards an Indiana Pacers who have already clinched. They are there. They beat the Cavs in 5. Your Cavs, Katie, I know. Tough stuff coming out of Jarrett Allen's end of season presser that made you feel some things yesterday. Anyone who wants to mention Frodo in the ring in relation to their basketball journey, I'm all for. We love Jarrett Allen. People who are going to roast him for that, there will be some because people are dumb and losers, but don't do it because he's cool as hell. Either way, Pacers are there. The New York Knicks, assuming they take care of business in Game 6 against the non-Jason Tatum having Boston Celtics, who I think, maybe it's not surprising they had a stirring emotional performance without Tatum, win one for the Gipper, all that stuff in Game 5 at home, push it back to Game 6. You would assume the Knicks are going to close this out at some point, and if not, it's some of the funniest content we'll ever have. But the prospect of a Siakam OG Conference Finals is very much on the horizon here, Katie. Something that is, I think, for Raptors fans, there's going to be some sick pleasure in it. Like, hey, those are our guys. Those are our guys. Look at that. There's also going to be maybe some remorse, sadness that they're doing it for other teams. How do you feel about a Siakam OG Conference Finals and all the sort of emotional equity tied up into that?
Yeah, it's I like it. I like watching the two of them play. So it's just very cool to see the way that their games have evolved, and they've been free to take them in such completely different directions, on both these franchises, and also how integral they are to these teams. I've been thinking a lot about playoff experience and what makes this Pacers team feel a little bit different than last year's. And it was actually Dylan that reminded me of just Pascal is the one that's bringing playoff and championship caliber experience to the Pacers. He's the one lending that, which is a very cool thing to think. OG's doing OG by peripheral. I know, poor guy. He wasn't involved in that. He was, but he wasn't. But is that with the Knicks? And it's also just very cool to see OG still be playing this kind of pop up and scare the heck out of people kind of brand of basketball.
Yeah.
I do think the Knicks are going to best the Celtics. I just feel that way. The Celtics had to take one for Tatum, of course. But it feels untenable to go and win in the Garden. So this is.
So if it goes back to 7, that Game 7 is real
true.
Spicy. Yeah,
that's true. Which is kind of the reason they have to get it done anyway. But crazier things have happened, especially in these playoffs.
Totally.
I think to me, this is kind of the epitome of the chaotic basketball I want to watch. I know there's a lot of people that complain that you want to see a quote big team in the playoffs, but a playoffs where you're genuinely I don't. At this point, I could not tell you who's going to win it all. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't even tell you who's going to come out of either conference. Not with real confidence. I think that is one of the coolest things and one of the reasons why I love watching basketball and why I especially want to watch, these playoffs and not skip games because there's I know what's going to happen.
Right.
The idea that I don't know is an amazing one. And I think the idea that I don't know, especially between these two guys, they're going to be going up against each other, possession for possession, because that's what these games have been. These have been possession one games, they're not, no team is out for a big stretch. No team is really taking a confident sort of lead aside from a game here or there. But Pascal and OG, I think when you see, there's going to be a moment when watching, you see that recognition between them. It might be just they might both laugh knowing them. But I think that will be a very cool sort of I don't want to say full circle because nothing in their careers is finished yet.
Sure.
But I picture Kyle Lowry watching that. And it's that's a good feeling.
Yeah. Just bawling thinking about the idea of it. Just unbelievable. His two beloveds.
Yes.
I mean, I'm very excited for it too. Look, I'm generally a person who does when there's not necessarily like a big market team. I don't care about the market size of the teams that are involved, but I like it when there's a team that everyone's trying to knock off the mountain. I find that to be very compelling theater.
Sure.
But I'm also quite enjoying this parody ass playoffs. It's really fun. And it is kind of cool it's nice that you can have both. And maybe we're not going to have both going forward. Maybe the league is kind of going in a direction where it's just too hard to win back to back, as we're seeing with Boston and every other team since the Warriors won their second with Kevin Durant. It's just damn hard to play 2 full seasons of 100+ games and keep everyone healthy and fresh and on task and everything. And so, yeah, if it means that we get this kind of unpredictable, sort of fascinating run through the playoffs where any team can kind of talk themselves into, oh God, we're like a couple wins away from the finals all of a sudden. This is crazy. Like, that's cool to me too. I like all forms of hoop. When it comes to the Siakam OG thing, let me ask you this, and maybe we bust out an old favorite here as you respond, but do you find there's any seller's remorse on the Raptors end of things? You move on from OG and Pascal. These two guys are clearly key cogs in conference finals level teams. Siakam 2 years in a row now. Is there a way the Raptors could have achieved similar success had they just kept these guys around and not made all the trades that they did? Was it always just kind of the end of the line for that group of that duo of guys? Fred VanVleet obviously part of that as well. When he walked away, things got real tricky. But I don't know. Maybe we should ask our pal Hot Take Heindl what she thinks about the Toronto Raptors situation and whether or not they should have seller's remorse moving on from Siakam and OG. Hot Take Heindl, take it away.
Oh, this is more of like a simmering take. I don't think the Raptors were ready to hang on to these two guys and like
they didn't have that dog in them, is what you're saying, Katie?
Yield the same results. I mean, look, like when you've already, I will say that I think the declaration of Scotty Barnes as the one was maybe 2 seasons premature.
Sure.
But in declaring that, you cannot backtrack on it. And in declaring that, you sort of you start this domino sequence falling that looks like and does then become the jettisoning of OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam. And I think Fred as sort of the one who held that last iteration of the team together. Mm-hmm. You got a clean house, right? A little bit that is like, what is it? The phrase cutting off your ear to spite your face.
Yeah. I think
like you got to go
at knowing what the actual phrase
you're going
is.
through with the decision. Yeah. Like you're going through with a decision, you're a little bit like, oh shoot, like this is not the best decision, but I've already declared that this is what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And you got to live with it. You got to do that in the NBA because there's a credibility issue, right? If you don't do that, then like you just look like you're a fair weather franchise, which I would argue they became anyway for a little while. So
there's the hot take, Heindl. Let's go.
No, and like to my earlier point, we wouldn't be seeing this kind of success and growth and maturation and everything in Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby's games separately if they hadn't left. They were freed up to do that. In other franchises, there was a lot of emotional weight. There's a lot of weight of season after season on them and staying in Toronto. The plan just did not include them. And also that's just like, that's not a place you want to play when you're kind of told like, hey, your time's up.
Yeah.
You don't want to be there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I think hot take Heindl. Thank you. Look, the heat on that one. I feel like there's more to be tapped into.
I didn't use the voice. I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe we'll come back to you for a little bonus hot take at the end of the show on the ongoing NBA playoffs or something like that, just so the people are satisfied with the heat level. But yeah, I'm with you. I think really the only path that would have been there to make the Siakam OG thing work would have been to trade Scotty Barnes for a star, right? And they kicked around, obviously, Kevin Durant, it seems, and Damian Lillard. I don't think Scotty was ever in that deal. That might have been an OG thing. Which maybe makes the Siakam Barnes thing work better. Who's to say? Or obviously the thing with Dame hasn't worked out very well for the Bucks. Maybe it's best probably is best they kept clear of that one. As unfortunate as that whole thing has gone with Dame. And so, yeah, I think it would have had to have been some other star that they make that deal for. And ultimately, yeah, it might have just been time. And both Siakam and OG get to move on and be, like crucial figures on really cool, important teams. And the Raptors, I think, have themselves a pathway to get back into that range as well with their current setup, although it's a little bit less clear how they're going to do it, though maybe a little clearer because the Eastern Conference, everyone's just like dropping like flies. So we'll see. I guess, okay, here, Katie.
Oh,
Let's
no.
put the flames back on the screen. Who would you prefer to see win? Pascal Siakam or OG Anunoby? Who you got? Pit them against one another. Pick one, Katie. It's Hot Take Heindl's time. Do the voice.
I mean, that's easy. That is easy. This is an easy choice. It's OG Anunoby because he had a curse. Like, he didn't get to any of these moments in his past playoffs. I'm sorry, that's not a hot take. That is a very emotional one.
Yeah.
But he deserves it more.
I need to get some water to put on the screen instead to pour on this heat. Yeah. We'll work on the production. Yeah. No, I think that's fair.
Pascal Siakam doesn't deserve it because he's healthy.
Hot take Heindl! Yeah!
He was too healthy.
Didn't try hard enough. Had he been trying harder, his appendix might have burst too.
Yeah.
All of that. Perfect. That feels like a great place to leave this one off, Katie. Thank you. Hot Take Heindl has reappeared, and the people are just shouting at home. Yeah! It's wonderful. Katie, thank you for being back on the show. Lovely to have you return from your beautiful looking trips overseas and everything. Where can people check out all your fine work?
Blue Sky?
Blue Sky.
Yeah. I'm a Blue Sky.
Right?
Yeah. I logged into Twitter the other day. Should have done that.
Don't do it, man.
Yeah. I had to
Sometimes
find
I have to go in there to like check a work message. And
I had to find a clip.
hell experience.
And I couldn't. Anyway, you can find me there. And then I will say Exits. Exits is in its 5th season series. The series is in its 5th season of Basketball Feelings. So it's a retrospective look on every team as they're eliminated, published as they're eliminated by myself, as well as a lot of really cool guest writers, thinkers, talkers.
Everyone, go and do that. It's much appreciated when you support all of our work, Katie's work in particular, because it's really damn good. You can follow, subscribe, rate, review, join the podcast Discord if you want. Link in the description of the podcast. Follow on Instagram, again, trying to post more clips there and stuff like that. And we'll be back again on Friday as we continue not talking about Giannis with a crossover episode with Camille Davis from Locked On Bucks to talk about Giannis. So you have that to look forward to on Friday. Thanks so much. I got to pick my basketball up off the floor. Katie, at the end of yesterday's show, I absolutely nailed the shot. I'm trying to hit it again. Keep it going. Thanks so much for hanging. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Damn it.